The city never sleeps, not even for a woman's pain. Linian's scream was swallowed by the siren of the ambulance racing through Fifth Avenue. Her fingers clutched the railing as another contraction tore through her body. The nurse beside her pressed a towel against her forehead. "You're 33 weeks, Mrs. Park. We're almost there. Stay with me." But Lean's eyes weren't on the nurse. They were fixed on the iPhone, trembling in her hand, lit with a breaking news headline: CEO Adrian Park to propose at Ritz-Carlton charity gala tonight. The photo showed him in a tuxedo, holding hands with a woman who wasn't her, Grace Layton, his PR director, his secret, and now his public lover. Her pulse spiked, not just from pain but from betrayal. She gasped, "No, he wouldn't, not tonight." The nurse misunderstood, thinking it was another contraction. "Breathe, Mrs. Park. You need to save your strength for the babies." At that moment, 3 tiny heartbeats fluttered on the monitor beside her. 3 lives fighting to stay alive inside her fragile frame. Lynn forced a weak smile. "Hold on, my angels," she whispered. "Mama's not leaving you." The ambulance stopped at Mount Sinai near Central Park. Rain slicked the streets, reflecting the Manhattan skyline like shattered glass. Inside the hospital, Dr. Maya Patel was waiting, her coat still damp from the storm. "Severe preeclampsia," she said, scanning the vitals. "Prepare for possible emergency C-section. Get magnesium started. I want NICU on standby." As Ling was wheeled in, a small silver USB drive fell from her coat pocket. Dr. Patel bent down, picking it up. "What's this?" Lynn's lips trembled. "Evidence? For my lawyer. Don't lose it." Across town, the Ritz-Carlton ballroom glowed gold, violins warming up for the night's performance. Adrian Park stood before the mirror, straightening his black tie. His Mont Blanc pen rested neatly on the counter beside a Tiffany box. Inside, a diamond ring worth 3 months of Lynn's hospital bills. He practiced his smile, the kind that sold millions of shares and fooled millions of hearts. "Tonight," he told Grace, "we become untouchable." Grace brushed invisible lint from his jacket. "And your wife?" Adrian looked away, cold. "The doctor said she's resting. Let her stay that way." Back at the hospital, Lynn's phone vibrated again. A message from Ethan Cho, Adrian's old friend and current COO. "Lynn, I found the proof. Don't give up. The judge is reviewing your case tonight." Lynn stared at the screen, tears blurring the words. She wanted to respond, but another wave of pain forced a scream out of her chest. Her hand grabbed the side rail, knuckles whitening. Dr. Patel rushed in. "Her pressure's climbing. We need to move now." "Doctor," Lynn panted, "please, don't let him take everything." "Doctor," Patel looked down at her, eyes firm. "You focus on surviving. Let the rest of us fight the battles outside." Meanwhile, at the Ritz, Adrian lifted his glass of champagne, smiling for cameras. "To new beginnings," he declared. The audience clapped. Somewhere between the applause and the flash of cameras, the universe shifted. One woman fighting for breath, another posing for headlines. The storm outside grew heavier. Lightning streaked over the Manhattan skyline like cracks in a mirror. Lynn's monitor beeped violently. Her body shook as she whispered her baby's names: Hope, Faith, and Noah. "We fight together," she said faintly. Dr. Patel shouted, "She's going into distress. Get the OR ready now." Nurses rushed around, the room a blur of white coats and alarms. As the doors to the operating room swung open, Lynn's phone slipped from her hand, screen still glowing with Adrian's face and the words "Live, CEO proposal tonight." Her last thought before the anesthesia hit was simple, sharp, and burning. If I survive this night, he won't. Rain kept hammering against the hospital windows as midnight bled into the city. Inside Mount Sinai's maternity wing, the beeping monitors formed a desperate symphony. Lynn lay pale on the bed, sweat glistening on her forehead, her breathing shallow and uneven. Dr. Maya Patel leaned over the monitor, brows furrowed. "Her blood pressure's at 170/110. We can't wait much longer." The nurse tightened the oxygen mask. "Doctor, she's asking for her husband." Maya hesitated. "He's not coming." Her voice was flat, not cruel, just factual. In Lynn's trembling hand, her iPhone buzzed again. A news alert. Ritz-Carlton Charity Gala Live, CEO Adrian Park to announce engagement. A single image filled the screen, Adrian's lips inches from Grace Layton's cheek, flashlights sparkling around them like cruel stars. The nurse tried to take the phone away, but Lynn clutched it to her chest. "That's my husband," she whispered, "and I'm still his wife." The door swung open. A woman in a soaked gray trench coat entered, hair dripping, glasses fogged. Lin Nguyen? She asked. I'm Hannah Tran, your hospital attorney. We need to talk, right now. Dr. Patel frowned. She's in active labor, Miss Tran. Hannah nodded quickly. I know, but there's a legal emergency. The power of attorney Adrian filed is fraudulent. He changed the consent documents while she was sedated last month. We need her signature on a corrected form before the C-section. Lin blinked. Dazed. He forged my name? Yes. And if it stands, he gains full control of your medical and financial decisions, including whether you live through this surgery. The words hit like a thunderclap. Lin tried to lift her head, but pain forced her back down. Get me the paper, she said, voice trembling but steady. I'll sign whatever I have to. Hannah pulled a folder from her bag, hands shaking slightly from the cold. We just need your initials and fingerprint. It'll revoke his authority and appoint Dr. Patel as your temporary guardian during the operation. Lin nodded, gripping the pen with weak fingers. The paper trembled under each stroke of her signature. When it was done, Hannah exhaled. That's it. I'll file it immediately. Judge Bennett is on night duty. She can issue a restraining order before dawn. Dr. Patel turned to the nurse. Increase magnesium. Prepare the OR. Page NICU. We're going in within 30 minutes. Lin closed her eyes, hearing nothing but her heartbeats mingling with 3 smaller ones on the monitor. Maya, she whispered, if something happens to me. Nothing will. Dr. Patel cut her off. You and your babies will make it. Across the city, inside the golden ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, Adrian laughed under chandeliers. The jazz band shifted into a soft ballad. Grace, radiant in silver Dior, whispered, it's almost time. Adrian checked his Rolex, smirking. The market loves a love story. But on the edge of his vision, his phone screen flashed an alert, an encrypted email from his COO, Ethan. Stop what you're doing. Court filing incoming. TRO motion. Judge Bennett. Adrian frowned, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Ignore it, he muttered. No one can touch me tonight. Back at Mount Sinai, Hannah hurried down the corridor, clutching the signed forms, coat flapping behind her like a shadow. I'll get this stamped within the hour, she told the nurse. Don't let anyone else near her chart. Inside the delivery room, Lin's contractions intensified. She gasped for air, every nerve on fire. Dr. Patel adjusted her IV, murmuring, breathe for them, Lin. Just breathe. Tears slipped down Lin's cheeks. 3 little hearts, she whispered, and only one mother to fight for them. The heart monitor suddenly spiked, alarms echoing. Dr. Patel's calm broke. BP 200. We're losing time. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, painting everything in white fear. Nurses rushed to stabilize her. Somewhere between pain and darkness, Lin heard her own voice echo in her mind. He's out there putting a ring on her finger while I'm dying to keep his children alive. And just as the world dimmed, Dr. Patel shouted the 2 words that would decide everything. Midnight in Manhattan looked like 2 different worlds colliding. At the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, crystal chandeliers dripped golden light over champagne glasses and designer gowns. The air was thick with perfume and power. Reporters from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes lingered near the velvet ropes, waiting for one headline: the CEO who turned heartbreak into triumph. Adrian Park was about to sell his perfect story. Meanwhile, at Mount Sinai, the lights were dimmed to preserve calm in the maternity wing. The only sounds were the rhythmic beeps of monitors and the soft hum of ventilators in the NICU. Lin's breathing had slowed, her eyelids fluttering as Dr. Patel checked the magnesium drip. BP stabilizing for now, she murmured, though she didn't sound convinced. Hannah Tran burst back into the ward, coat damp from the rain. The judge's clerk confirmed receipt, the restraining orders being reviewed. We just need the digital signature. She handed Dr. Patel a sealed envelope. Once this is stamped, Adrian loses control, legally and financially, until Lin recovers. Dr. Patel nodded, relief washing over her face. Then we fight on 2 fronts, medicine and law. But Lin barely heard them. Her mind drifted in and out, flashes of memory playing like broken film. Adrian laughing on their honeymoon in Maui, whispering that nothing could come between them. Then another flash. Grace, young, ambitious, leaning a little too close during board meetings. The pain wasn't just in her body, it was in every lie she'd chosen to ignore. Doctor, whispered the nurse, her contractions are coming faster. Dr. Patel grabbed her stethoscope. 10 minutes until we move. Keep her alert. Hannah turned to Lin, lowering her voice. I'm sending the final motion to Judge Bennett. We'll have protection before sunrise. You just stay alive, okay? Lynn's lips trembled into a small broken smile. Tell her, thank you. Across town, the Ritz glittered brighter than ever. Adrian stood backstage with Grace, who shimmered under the spotlight. The host tapped his cue cards. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our visionary, Mr. Adrian Park. Thunderous applause erupted. Adrian walked out, sleek in his tailored tuxedo, the Manhattan skyline flickering through the ballroom's glass walls. He gripped the microphone, his voice confident, rehearsed. Tonight isn't about business, he said smoothly. It's about love, the kind that inspires innovation. The crowd swooned. Grace pretended to blush. In the shadows near the back, Ethan Cho watched silently, hands buried in his pockets. He wasn't supposed to be there. But when he heard about Lynn's condition, he'd followed his gut and his guilt. Now he stood watching the man he once admired turn his marriage into a marketing stunt. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened an encrypted folder. Inside were screenshots, spreadsheets, and confidential emails, proof that Adrian had funneled corporate funds into his personal trust using Lynn's forged signature. He hit send and forwarded the evidence to Hannah's inbox. Back at the hospital, Hannah's phone vibrated on the nurse's desk. She opened the message, eyes widening. "Oh my God," she whispered. "We have everything. The money trail, the fake authorizations, the emails." Dr. Patel looked up. "Can it wait until after surgery?" Hannah shook her head. "No, the judge needs this now. If he goes public with that engagement tonight, it'll influence investors. We have to stop it before the markets open Monday." She ran out again, clutching the phone like a weapon. At the Ritz, Adrian took Grace's hand. "Tonight, we start our future," he said for the cameras. Grace smiled, though something in his tone chilled her. For a second, she thought she saw guilt flash behind his eyes. But then the flashbulbs drowned it out. Outside, rain fell harder, drumming against the Grand Hotel windows. Back in the ward, Lynn's monitor began to spike again. Dr. Patel pressed a cold stethoscope to her belly. "We're losing stability. Get the OR ready now." Lynn's hand shot out weakly, clutching the doctor's wrist. "Please," she whispered, "don't let him win." Dr. Patel met her gaze, steady and fierce. "He won't." As Lynn was wheeled toward the glowing doors of the operating room, the nurse whispered, "She's ready." And across town, the MC's voice boomed through the Ritz ballroom, echoing over applause. "Get ready, everyone. Adrian Park's big moment is next." The curtain rose, and fate held its breath. The elevator doors at Mount Sinai slid open with a hiss, releasing the faint scent of antiseptic and rain. Hannah rushed back into the maternity ward, hair soaked, heels clicking on the floor. "Dr. Patel," she called, waving a flash drive above her head. "Ethan just sent the files, proof of corporate fraud, forgery, everything." Dr. Patel looked up from Lynn's bedside, her surgical mask hanging loose around her neck. "Upload it to the hospital's secure system," she said sharply. "If anything happens to Lynn, that drive will keep her safe in another way." Hannah nodded, plugging the USB into the nurse's station computer. On screen, folders opened, spreadsheets, bank transfers, email threads, even a video of Adrian signing papers next to Lynn's hospital bed weeks earlier while she lay unconscious after a checkup. "He used her medical sedation to get her signature," Hannah whispered, horrified. "He wasn't just cheating, he was stealing her life." Lynn stirred, voice weak. "Is it all in there?" "Yes," Hannah said softly. "Every lie, every dollar." "Then promise me," Lynn murmured. "If I don't make it, you give that to the judge." Dr. Patel turned sharply. "Don't say that. You'll make it. Now breathe slowly." Across town, inside the Ritz-Carlton, the orchestra's violins swelled into a romantic crescendo. Grace Layton stood near the stage, her silver gown shimmering under the golden light. The MC's voice echoed through the ballroom. "And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, Mr. Adrian Park." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Adrian walked to the center of the stage, microphone in hand, every step calculated, every smile rehearsed. He turned to Grace, taking her hand. "You've stood by me through everything," he began. "Tonight, in front of our friends, our investors, and the city that built us, I want to begin a new chapter." In the crowd, Ethan watched from a corner table, his phone vibrating with a message from Hannah. "Files received. Judge Bennett notified. Stay on him." Ethan typed back, "I'll keep recording." On stage, Adrian opened a small Tiffany box, revealing a diamond ring so bright it caught every eye in the room. "Grace Leighton," he said, lowering to one knee, "will you?" But his voice cut off when Grace's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down. The message came from an unknown number. "Do not kiss him. The court is watching." Her fingers trembled. "Adrian," she whispered. He forced a grin, whispering back through clenched teeth, "Ignore it. This is our moment." At that exact second, thunder cracked outside, shaking the chandeliers. Back at Mount Sinai, Lynn's vitals spiked again. The monitor screamed as her blood pressure soared. Dr. Patel barked orders. "We're moving now. Get the OR prepped. Tell NICU we're bringing 3 preemies any minute." Hannah unplugged the USB, sealing it in a hospital evidence bag. "I'm taking this straight to the courthouse," she said. Dr. Patel nodded. "Go. I'll keep her alive." Lynn grabbed Hannah's wrist. "Tell the judge. Tell her he's at the Ritz. Tell her the ring is proof. He's doing it to erase me." "I'll tell her everything," Hannah promised, squeezing Lynn's hand. "Now you fight for those babies." Hannah ran out into the rain, clutching the evidence like it was oxygen. Meanwhile, the ballroom lights dimmed. The screen behind Adrian lit up, playing a pre-recorded video, the love story of Adrian and Grace. Laughter, smiles, beach sunsets, all edited to perfection. But as the crowd watched, one frame froze for half a second too long. Behind Adrian in that video, barely visible, was a hospital bed, a woman's silhouette. Lynn, swollen, pale, hooked to an IV. The room fell silent. Grace's lips parted. "Adrian, what is that?" He froze, eyes wide, as whispers spread through the audience. "Is that his wife?" someone gasped. "Isn't she pregnant?" Adrian forced a laugh. "It's old footage." But Ethan, recording from the back, zoomed in on the screen. He knew the truth. That video wasn't old. It was from the same day Adrian forged Lynn's signature. And as the music stopped, the sound of thunder returned, rolling across Manhattan. Somewhere between a diamond ring and a dying heart monitor, justice had just begun to breathe. Rain whipped through the Manhattan night as Hannah's black Mercedes sliced across the slick asphalt toward the courthouse on Center Street. The windshield wipers fought to keep up, each swipe revealing blurry streaks of yellow taxis and blinking streetlights. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, the USB drive sealed in an evidence bag on the passenger seat beside her. The file could destroy a CEO, but more importantly, it could save a dying woman. In the back seat, Ethan's voice came through the Bluetooth speaker. "Hannah, how long till you get there?" 15 minutes, she said, weaving through traffic. "The clerk's on standby. Judge Bennett said she won't leave her chambers till we deliver this." "Good," Ethan replied, "because Adrian's about to propose any minute. The live feed's everywhere. Once he kisses her, the narrative changes. Lynn will look like the past, not the wife." Hannah gritted her teeth. "Then we change the story before he does." Inside the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, the storm outside only made the chandeliers glow brighter. Reporters whispered near the stage, waiting for the perfect photo. The billionaire, the ring, the kiss. Grace Leighton stood under the spotlight, her eyes glossy, her pulse racing faster than the jazz band's rhythm. Adrian leaned close, his hand steady as stone. "Relax," he murmured. "After tonight, no one can question us." But the corner of her phone screen still glowed. Warning, court motion filed, temporary restraining order pending. She didn't understand what it meant, but something inside her twisted. "Adrian," she said softly, "are you sure about this?" He smiled, smooth as ever. "Grace, in business and in love, you don't show fear." Across town, in the maternity ward, Dr. Maya Patel adjusted Lynn's IV as the monitors shrieked again. "Her liver enzymes are rising," the nurse said. "BP's 200 over 130. Maya cursed under her breath. "Prep the OR now." She leaned over Lynn. "Listen to me, sweetheart. We're delivering those babies in 10 minutes. Stay awake as long as you can, okay?" Lynn's lips trembled. "Promise me you won't let him take them." "I promise," Maya said, gripping her hand. "You just fight." The elevator doors opened as the surgical team rushed in. Lynn's gurney rolled down the hall, passing rows of silent rooms. The fluorescent lights flickered, and the sound of thunder rattled the ceiling tiles. Back at the Ritz, Ethan stood at the edge of the ballroom, his phone camera trained on the stage. Adrian was still talking, spinning his love story like a product pitch. "They say love and business don't mix," he told the crowd, "but I built this company from love. And tonight, I'm building a future." The audience clapped. Cameras flashed. Grace smiled, but her fingers twitched nervously at her side. Meanwhile, Hannah pulled into the courthouse parking lot, the storm pelting her windshield. She grabbed the evidence bag and sprinted through the rain. Her heels splashed through puddles, water soaking her legs, breath coming in gasps. Inside, security stopped her at the metal detector. "I need Judge Bennett, emergency injunction, case number 447A. The guard hesitated, then picked up the phone. A moment later, a tall woman appeared at the top of the stairs. Judge Claire Bennett, her robe half-buttoned, eyes sharp despite the hour. "You'd better have something worth waking me for, Miss Tran." Hannah slammed the evidence bag onto the counter. Proof of fraud, forged consent, financial abuse. The victim's in surgery right now. 3 lives on the line. If Adrian Park announces that engagement, he manipulates investors and destroys her rights as his wife. Claire's eyes flickered to the USB. "Then let's stop him." As the 2 women disappeared into chambers, thunder cracked again over Manhattan. At that same moment, back at Mount Sinai, Lynn's world went white as anesthesia fogged her vision. She caught a glimpse of Dr. Patel's mask, then the bright surgical light above. Hold on, she thought. Hold on until someone says justice. And at the Ritz-Carlton, Adrian held the microphone tighter, smiling for the cameras. "To love," he said, raising his glass. Outside the ballroom, lightning split the sky in 2, and the city began counting down the last seconds before everything exploded. The courthouse clock struck 1:05 a.m. as thunder rolled through lower Manhattan. Hannah burst through the revolving doors of the Supreme Court building, soaked from head to toe. Her heels slapped against the marble floor, echoing down the empty hallway like gunshots. She clutched the evidence bag against her chest, Lynn's last line of defense. As a security guard pointed toward the stairwell, "Judge Bennett's in Chamber 3B. She's waiting." Hannah ran, breath-ragged, hair plastered to her face. She reached the door just as it swung open from the inside. Judge Claire Bennett stood there in a navy coat over her robe, eyes fierce, silver hair pulled back in a bun. "You must be Miss Tran," she said evenly. "Let's see what's so urgent that you dragged me out of bed at 1 in the morning." Hannah handed her the flash drive with trembling fingers. "Ma'am, the patient is Lynn Nguyen Park. She's in critical labor at Mount Sinai. Her husband, CEO Adrian Park, forged medical and financial documents while she was under sedation. He's about to announce an engagement on live television to his mistress. If that announcement goes public before we file, he gains narrative control and leverage over her estate." Judge Bennett blinked once. "And you have proof?" Hannah nodded. "Emails, video, financial trails, everything." Claire turned to the clerk beside her. "Open the emergency hearing line. Get me a connection to the New York County Registrar, and call the Mount Sinai Legal Department. We'll do this now." As they entered the chamber, Hannah saw the portraits of old judges staring down at them, solemn and heavy, like ghosts of justice past. Claire sat behind the polished oak bench, adjusting her glasses. "Proceed," she said. Meanwhile, at the Ritz-Carlton, the ballroom glimmered like a jewel box. Grace stood frozen under the spotlight, the Tiffany ring still in its velvet box. The MC whispered, "We're live in 60 seconds." Adrian checked his Mont Blanc pen in his pocket like a nervous tick, then looked at the cameras and smiled. "This," he whispered to Grace, "is the moment everything changes." Back in the courthouse, the courtroom monitor flickered to life. Ethan's face appeared via video call, pale and determined. "Your Honor, I'm Ethan Cho, acting COO of Park Technologies. I'm submitting corroborating evidence, internal emails showing financial manipulation tied to Mr. Park's personal accounts, and confirmation that Mrs. Park never consented to any transfer of rights." Judge Bennett leaned forward. "Understood. I'm reviewing now." The tension in the room thickened as the clerk typed rapidly. The only sounds were the tapping of keys and the rain against the tall windows. Hannah's phone buzzed. Dr. Patel texting from the hospital. "She's crashing. BP unstable. Preparing for emergency delivery." Hannah swallowed hard, whispering, "Come on, Judge, please." Claire scanned the files on screen, her eyes narrowing at the forged signature. He used her name while she was sedated? "Yes, Your Honor," Hannah said, voice shaking. "And he's turning her medical crisis into a media distraction." Claire's jaw tightened. "That's not just unethical, that's criminal." She picked up her pen and began writing rapidly. The sound of ink scratching paper was the only sign of movement in the room. "We're issuing a temporary restraining order. Immediate effect. No marital status change, no transfer of assets, no public declaration that alters perception of his marriage. Serve it electronically and by physical delivery to the Ritz-Carlton immediately." The clerk jumped up. "Yes, Your Honor." Across the city, inside the ballroom, the MC's countdown began. 10 seconds. Grace's heart pounded. Adrian knelt before her, smiling like a man who believed he owned the world. Cameras flashed, champagne flutes sparkled. In the courthouse, Claire pressed her seal onto the document with a heavy thud. The red stamp bled across the paper like spilled wine. "Effective now," she said. "Let's stop the show." The clerk grabbed the signed order and sprinted toward the fax room. Hannah exhaled for the first time in minutes, whispering, "We did it." But her phone buzzed again. A message from Ethan. Too late. He's on stage. And at that same instant, in the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, the crowd began to cheer. As Adrian lowered to one knee, the storm outside cracked open the night, and the race between life, love, and law reached its breaking point. The orchestra quieted. Every camera turned toward the stage where Adrian Park knelt, one knee pressed to the polished marble floor of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. 1,000 people leaned forward, holding their breath. The diamond ring gleamed under the chandelier like a second moon. "Grace Leighton," Adrian said, voice rich and rehearsed. "You've shown me loyalty, courage, and love. Tonight, in front of our friends, our partners in the world, will you marry me?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Grace stood frozen, her pulse thundering in her ears. For a moment she could barely hear the applause starting to swell. Her eyes darted to the back of the room where Ethan Cho stood, his phone raised, live streaming the event. Something about his expression, grim, knowing, made her hesitate. "Adrian," she whispered, "there's something wrong." He smiled tightly, taking her hand. "There's nothing wrong, just say yes." Outside, the storm roared, lightning flashing across the Manhattan skyline. Inside Mount Sinai Hospital, the surgical team worked under sterile white light. Dr. Patel barked orders over the sound of monitors. "Fetal heart rate's dropping. Push magnesium, get me more suction. We need to move faster." Lynn's face was pale as marble, her breath shallow. Through the haze of anesthesia, she whispered names: Hope, Faith, and Noah, like a prayer trying to stay alive. "Hold on, babies," she murmured. "Don't let go yet." At that same moment, in the courthouse, Judge Bennett watched the live broadcast on her laptop. "We served the order?" she asked the clerk. "Yes, Your Honor." Delivered to the Ritz's event manager and emailed to Mr. Park's legal team. Claire's sharp eyes narrowed. "Then let's see if he ignores a federal injunction on national television." Back at the Ritz, Adrian lifted the ring toward Grace's trembling hand. The MC whispered into his mic, "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment of truth." The orchestra began to play again, violins swelling, soft and romantic. Adrian slid the ring onto Grace's finger. The audience rose to their feet in applause. Flashbulbs exploded. He reached for her face, fingers brushing her jaw. And that's when the ballroom doors burst open. 2 uniformed court officers strode in, soaked from the storm, badges glinting under the chandelier light. "Mr. Adrian Park?" one called out, voice echoing. The crowd fell silent. Grace froze, ring half slipped on her hand. Adrian turned, startled but trying to recover his composure. "This is a private event," the officer interrupted, holding up a sealed envelope. "You've been served, sir. Temporary restraining order issued by Judge Claire Bennett of the New York Supreme Court, effective immediately." Murmurs spread through the ballroom like ripples on water. "What's happening? Is this part of the show? Did he just get served on live TV?" Ethan stopped recording for a second, stunned by the timing. Then he lifted his phone again, whispering, "Lynn, you made it." Adrian's face turned pale. "This is outrageous," he barked. "You can't interrupt a private." The officer handed him the document. "The court can interrupt whatever it deems necessary, sir." Grace stepped back, eyes wide, tears beginning to pool. "Adrian, what did you do?" He opened his mouth to answer, but the band had stopped and all the microphones were still live. His words echoed through the speakers. "She was supposed to be unconscious." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Grace covered her mouth. Across the city in the hospital, Dr. Patel heard the faint sound of a phone vibrating in her pocket. A news alert. CEO Adrian Park served court order mid-proposal. She looked down at Lynn, who lay unconscious on the table. "You did it, Lynn," she whispered. "You really did it." At the Ritz, Adrian tried to grab the microphone, desperate to control the chaos. "This is fake news. All of it," he shouted. But the officer read aloud, "Order of restraint. Any public declaration or representation of marital status altered during ongoing investigation shall be considered void." The ballroom lights flickered as lightning struck outside. Grace tore the ring from her finger and threw it at Adrian's feet. "You lied to everyone," she said, her voice shaking. "Including me." The room erupted in noise, reporters shouting, guests filming, whispers turning into chaos. And somewhere between the applause and the storm, Adrian Park realized the kiss he'd been waiting for had turned into a sentence instead of a promise. In that frozen moment, the ring lay gleaming on the marble, and justice, for the first time, had found its spotlight. For a split second, the ballroom hung in silence, the kind that comes just before an explosion. Then the confetti cannons fired. Gold and white paper rained from the ceiling, shimmering through the air, covering the chaos that had already begun to unfold. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. Grace Leeton stood frozen under the falling lights, the Tiffany ring glinting uselessly at her feet. "Turn off the music," Adrian barked. His voice cracked through the microphone, but the band had already stopped, staring at him like witnesses to a crime. The orchestra's last note faded into nothing. The scent of roses and champagne turned sickly sweet in the thick, humid air. The two court officers moved forward, one holding up the sealed order. "Mr. Park, you are under an immediate injunction. Any announcement or public representation of your relationship status is hereby suspended. The court has determined sufficient cause for potential fraud and coercion." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You have no jurisdiction in this ballroom." "Sir," one officer said evenly, "we have jurisdiction anywhere in New York County." Grace stepped backward, the heel of her silver stiletto crunching the confetti. Her voice trembled. "Adrian, is this true? You forged your wife's consent while she was sedated?" He glared at her, whispering harshly, "Don't say a word." She shook her head. "You said she was fine. You said the divorce was done." Adrian forced a smile for the cameras still recording. "Ladies and gentlemen, this appears to be a misunderstanding. My wife is—" But before he could finish, a large monitor behind him flickered to life. The hotel's AV technician had forgotten to cut the live stream. The screen displayed a split broadcast, one half showing the chaos inside the Ritz, the other half showing the courthouse feed. Judge Claire Bennett, stern in her robe, signing the order. Her voice came through the ballroom speakers, calm and powerful. "This injunction takes effect immediately. Any violation will result in contempt charges. Mr. Park's current spouse, Mrs. Lynn Wynn Park, is under emergency medical care and retains full legal rights as his wife." The crowd gasped. Grace's hand shot to her mouth. "She's alive?" Adrian turned toward the screen, his face losing color. "Cut that feed, now!" No one moved. The truth was too heavy to ignore. Across town at Mount Sinai, Dr. Maya Patel worked furiously. "We're ready." "Incision at the lower midline," she instructed. The operating lights reflected off her visor. "Scalpel." The first cry of a baby echoed faintly through the sterile room. Dr. Patel smiled under her mask. "Baby 1 is out. Strong cry. 2 more to go." The nurse's tablet buzzed with a news alert, but she ignored it. Her hands were busy wrapping the tiny, wailing infant in a blanket. At the Ritz, Grace finally stepped away from Adrian. "You lied to me," she said softly. "All of this, the gala, the proposal, was a cover." Adrian reached out to grab her wrist, but she jerked away. "You used me," she continued, voice breaking. "And you used her." Reporters closed in like vultures. Flashes went off. The officers radioed the courthouse. "Judge Bennett," one said into his mic, "the order has been served. The subject is non-compliant. Requesting next instruction." Through the speakers, Claire's voice answered, "Do not arrest. Observe. The moment he attempts to make another declaration, issue a contempt warning." Adrian tore off his microphone. "Everyone out," he shouted. "This event is over." But the ballroom was alive with murmurs, whispers, and the click of phone cameras. He could feel his empire cracking with every flash. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Lynn's second baby arrived, smaller, weaker, but breathing. "Keep her on CPAP," Dr. Patel ordered. "We're getting the third one." Outside, rain beat against the windows like a drum. Back at the Ritz, Grace turned to Adrian one last time. "You wanted the world to see your love story," she said. "Now they're watching your downfall." The ballroom doors swung open again. Another officer entered, holding an updated order. "Your Honor has issued an emergency hearing at dawn," he announced. Adrian's hands shook. "She won't survive the night," he muttered under his breath. But even as he said it, the hospital monitors beeped, a steady rhythm. Lynn's heart held firm, and while confetti still drifted across the marble floor, the woman he betrayed was winning her fight for life. The automatic doors to the operating room swung open, flooding the hallway with cold white light. Dr. Maya Patel led her team with unshakable precision, her voice calm but clipped. "Scalpel, suction, let's move. We've got minutes, not hours." The monitors blinked red and yellow, Lynn's pulse fighting to stay steady. The surgical techs moved like a well-rehearsed orchestra, each step choreographed between panic and hope. Lynn's body trembled under the anesthesia. Her lips parted slightly, whispering words only she could hear. "Don't let him take them." Dr. Patel leaned in, voice steady but soft. "He won't, I promise." The first incision gleamed under the sterile light. "We're in," Dr. Patel said. "Amniotic sac visible? Get NICU ready." Outside the glass window, the nurses prepared 3 incubators, their plastic domes gleaming like bubbles of fragile life. The soft hiss of oxygen filled the corridor. Back at the Ritz-Carlton, Adrian stood alone in the ballroom's center, surrounded by reporters, his once perfect smile cracking like thin glass. The confetti had melted into wet clumps on the floor from spilled champagne. Grace had disappeared through a side door, trailed by flashes of cameras. The court officers remained at the exit, their presence silent but suffocating. His phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Adrian answered through clenched teeth. "You think you've won?" Ethan's voice came through, quiet and firm. "No, Adrian, she has. The company will survive, just not with you." Adrian laughed bitterly. "You don't have the guts to fire me." "Already did," Ethan said. "The board's meeting at noon. You're suspended until the investigation ends. The SEC already got the reports." The line went dead. Adrian threw his phone onto the champagne-soaked carpet. It cracked open like everything else he had built. At Mount Sinai, the first baby was out. A girl, tiny but strong. Her cry filled the sterile air, piercing and beautiful. "Apgar 8, the nurse called. "Stable." Dr. Patel's gloved hands trembled for only a second before steadying. "Good. 1 down, 2 to go. Clamp and move." Lynn's blood pressure dipped again. "We're losing volume," shouted the anesthesiologist. "Push fluids now." Dr. Patel's voice sharpened. "She's not leaving these babies alone. Keep her with us." In the courthouse, Judge Bennett reviewed a live feed from the hospital, her brows furrowed. Hannah stood beside her, soaked and exhausted but still alert. "The first baby's out," she said quietly. Claire exhaled through her nose. "Let's hope that mother's heart is as stubborn as her lawyer." At the Ritz, chaos reigned. Security tried to clear the ballroom, but reporters pressed closer, their microphones flashing red lights like warning signals. Adrian tried to reclaim control. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, forcing a laugh. "My wife's condition is tragic, but we've been separated for months." Someone in the crowd interrupted, shouting, "That's not what the court says." Adrian froze as another reporter added, "The injunction names her your current spouse." He felt the floor tilting beneath him, as though the city itself had turned against him. At that exact moment, back in the operating room, Dr. Patel lifted the second baby, a boy this time, silent at first, limp. The room held its breath. "Come on," she whispered, rubbing his tiny chest. "Come on, sweetheart." A faint gasp, then a cry. Weak but real. The nurses smiled behind their masks. "2 out, 1 more," Dr. Patel said, her eyes darting to the monitor. Lynn's vitals were slipping fast. "She's crashing! Heart rate dropping," the anesthesiologist called out. Dr. Patel's voice turned to command. "Epinephrine! Now! I'm not losing her!" As adrenaline coursed through Lynn's veins, her heart monitor beeped back to life, stubborn and steady. Dr. Patel exhaled sharply. "There you are, Mama. Let's finish this." Outside, dawn broke over Manhattan. The storm had passed, leaving the streets washed clean, gleaming beneath the streetlights. Back in the ballroom, Adrian stood drenched in the remnants of his own spectacle. The confetti clung to his tuxedo like ash. Cameras still rolled. And across the city, in the operating room, Dr. Patel lifted the third baby, impossibly small, but breathing. She looked up at the clock. 5:32 a.m. "Triplets delivered," she said softly, "all alive." Her eyes filled with tears, and so is she. As the sun rose over the city, one empire fell, while 3 new lives took their first breath. Sunlight seeped into the city like forgiveness after a storm. The skyscrapers of Manhattan shimmered with new light, but in the maternity wing of Mount Sinai, the world had narrowed to one room, bright, sterile, and trembling with the sound of life. Dr. Maya Patel stood at the head of the operating table, hands steady though her eyes shone with exhaustion. "Triplets delivered," she said quietly, all breathing. Around her, the nurses moved like clockwork, one wiping Lynn's forehead, another transferring the newborns into their tiny incubators. The air smelled of antiseptic, tears, and hope. Lynn stirred weakly, her voice a ghost. "Are they safe?" Dr. Patel smiled behind her mask. "They're strong, just like you." The nurse wheeled the first incubator closer so Lynn could see. 3 tiny forms wrapped in blankets, one pink, one blue, one pale yellow. Hope, Faith, and Noah. Lynn's trembling fingers brushed the glass, a tear slipping down her cheek. "We made it," she whispered. In another corner of the hospital, Hannah Tran leaned against the wall outside the NICU, phone to her ear. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "All 3 are stable. The mother survived." Judge Claire Bennett's voice came through the line, calm but firm. "Then we move forward. The hearing begins at 10. Mr. Park will answer for everything." Hannah nodded. "I'll be there." Across the city, inside the Ritz-Carlton's deserted ballroom, the remnants of last night's chaos still lingered. Tables overturned, champagne puddles drying into sticky circles. The Tiffany ring lay in the middle of the floor, its brilliance dulled by confetti. Adrian sat slumped in a chair, head in his hands, tie undone, a ghost of the man who had owned the night before. The ballroom doors creaked open. Grace stepped inside, no makeup, no cameras, just truth. "You destroyed her," she said quietly, "and you almost destroyed me too." Adrian looked up, eyes bloodshot. "You don't understand. Everything I did was to protect the company." Grace shook her head. "You don't protect anything by lying, you just kill it slowly." He laughed bitterly. "You think they'll let her keep anything? Once the investors panic, we'll all drown." Grace took a step closer, dropping a folder on the table. "Not all of us. I sent the emails to the SEC this morning. I'm testifying against you." His face went cold. "You wouldn't." "I already did," she said. "You used me as a prop, Adrian. Now I'm done being part of your show." She turned and walked away, her heels echoing like a verdict. At Mount Sinai, Lynn was being transferred to recovery. The babies were in the NICU, tubes and monitors keeping rhythm with their new hearts. Dr. Patel leaned down beside her bed. "You did it, Lynn. They're alive and you're safe. Rest now." But Lynn's eyes stayed open, distant. "He's not done," she murmured. "He'll fight. He always does." "Then let him," Dr. Patel said gently. "You've already won." Outside, the media vans were already circling. The story had broken wide open. CEO served court order mid-proposal while wife delivers triplets. Headlines ran across every screen from Times Square to Twitter. Photos of Lynn in her hospital bed, holding her babies, became the image of quiet resilience that the city couldn't stop talking about. By noon, the courthouse was packed. Cameras flashed as Adrian entered in a wrinkled suit, flanked by his lawyers. Across the aisle, Hannah stood beside Judge Bennett, file in hand, while Ethan watched silently from the back. Claire read the charges clearly: forgery, fraud, medical exploitation, attempted coercion. Adrian said nothing. For the first time, the man who had controlled every narrative had no script left. Back in her hospital bed, Lynn held a small printed photo of her triplets. Their tiny hands wrapped around each other. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Hannah entered, smiling softly. The judge signed the injunction. He suspended indefinitely. "You're free." Lynn looked up, voice steady for the first time. "No, I'm not free. I'm beginning." Outside the window, the city glittered, not with wealth, but with possibility. Lynn whispered her baby's names again and pressed her hand over her heart. "He tried to bury me," she said softly, "but he didn't know I was a seed." And as the cameras outside celebrated the scandal, inside that small hospital room, 3 new lives began. Proof that even after betrayal, love can still rebuild what power tried to destroy. The clock on the courthouse wall read 10:17 a.m. when the hearing reconvened. The courtroom smelled faintly of wet coats and tension. Reporters filled every bench, their cameras waiting like vultures for the first sign of collapse. At the defense table, Adrian Park sat rigid in a navy suit that no longer looked like armor. His lawyer whispered furiously beside him, but Adrian's eyes were fixed on the judge's bench, where Judge Claire Bennett adjusted her glasses and spoke with the calm precision of a scalpel. This hearing concerns allegations of forged consent, financial misconduct, and medical exploitation, she said. Miss Tran, proceed. Hannah rose, smoothing her blazer. Her voice was measured, but the exhaustion behind her eyes carried the weight of everything Lynn had survived. Your Honor, the evidence presented includes video documentation of Mr. Park coercing his wife's signature while she was under hospital sedation. We also have proof of misappropriated company funds, money funneled into personal trusts connected to his mistress, Grace Layton. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Adrian clenched his fists. Claire nodded. Submit your first exhibit. Hannah plugged a flash drive into the projector. The lights dimmed. On screen, grainy footage filled the room. Lynn in a hospital bed, eyes half closed, ivy attached to her arm. Adrian leaned over her, pressing a pen into her limp fingers. Just sign here, his recorded voice said. It's for the insurance. A hush fell so deep, it was almost reverent. Grace, seated behind the defense, covered her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. Adrian shot up from his seat. That video is manipulated. Judge Bennett's gavel struck once. Sit down, Mr. Park. The projection continued, showing him sliding the signed paper into a folder labeled Power of Attorney, Spousal Transfer. The timestamp was only 6 weeks earlier. When the lights came back on, the silence turned heavy. Hannah's voice barely rose above a whisper. Your Honor, this is the moment he stole his wife's rights while pretending to protect her. Claire turned to Adrian. Do you deny this footage? He swallowed hard. It was. Context, Your Honor. My wife was confused. She didn't understand what needed to be done for the company. The company? Claire interrupted. Or for yourself? Adrian didn't answer. Grace stood suddenly, trembling. He's lying. He promised me 5% of the company if I helped cover the story. I have the emails. The gasp filled the courtroom. Claire's eyes flicked to the bailiff. Collect those. Hannah looked toward Grace. You're willing to submit them as evidence? Grace nodded, tears streaking her mascara. I don't want to go down with him. Adrian turned, rage twisting his face. You think they'll save you? You were part of it. Grace met his gaze. Not anymore. Across town at Mount Sinai, Lynn lay awake, listening to the soft beeps of the NICU monitors through the half-open door. Each sound was a promise that her babies were still fighting. A nurse adjusted her IV. You should rest, she said gently. Lynn shook her head. I'll rest when the truth is done. In the courtroom, Hannah held up a new document. This is the subsidiary contract between Park Technologies and Grace Layton PR. It details the unauthorized transfer of R&D funds into personal marketing accounts. Signed by both parties. Claire skimmed the papers, then looked at Adrian. Anything to say before I rule? He straightened his shoulders, desperate to regain control. I built an empire, he said, voice cracking. And my wife wanted to destroy it out of spite. I did what I had to do. Claire's tone was steel. You exploited a woman fighting for her life and unborn children. That's not strategy, Mr. Park. That's cruelty. Adrian's lawyer whispered, we can appeal. Claire raised a hand. The court recognizes intent, manipulation, and breach of fiduciary duty. This isn't about appeal. This is about accountability. She signed the order with one deliberate motion. Effective immediately, Mr. Park is suspended from all corporate duties and under investigation for fraud and medical exploitation. Mrs. Park retains full control of her estate and 51% of company shares pending confirmation. The gavel struck once. Across the room, Grace broke down quietly and Ethan exhaled for the first time in hours. And at that same moment, far from the courthouse, Lynn's phone buzzed beside her bed. The message from Hannah was short, only 3 words. You won, Lynn. Lynn closed her eyes, tears spilling silently as she whispered to her sleeping babies, justice sounds like your heartbeat. In the space between 2 heartbeats, one ending, one beginning, the truth finally took its first breath. The courthouse emptied slowly, reporters chasing headlines like vultures, but the story was no longer theirs to tell. Across Manhattan, in the quiet halls of Mount Sinai, morning sunlight streamed through the blinds and cast soft stripes of gold across Lynn's hospital bed. Her face, still pale from surgery, looked fragile but at peace. The world outside was loud with scandal, but inside her room, there was only the steady hum of life. Dr. Maya Patel entered quietly, holding a tablet with the NICU updates. "Good morning, warrior," she said with a tired smile. "How are you feeling?" Lynn blinked slowly, voice faint but sure. Empty. And full at the same time. Maya nodded. "That's motherhood." She pulled up a chair. "Your blood pressure's stable. No signs of organ failure. You made it through, Lynn." Lynn looked toward the incubators on the other side of the glass wall. 3 tiny shapes, each breathing with the rhythm of possibility. "Can I see them?" "Just for a minute," Maya said. She helped Lynn sit up slightly, supporting her with gentle hands. The nurse rolled the first incubator closer. The smallest baby, his chest rising and falling under the transparent cover. "That's Noah," Maya said. "He's our little fighter." Lynn's eyes filled with tears. "He's breathing. Stronger every hour," Maya confirmed. "And his sisters, Hope and Faith, are both responding beautifully to treatment." Lynn reached her hand toward the glass. "They were worth everything," she whispered. Across town, the courthouse buzzed again. Judge Bennett had called for a secondary review, a step toward freezing Adrian's offshore accounts. Hannah and Ethan stood outside the courtroom doors, exhausted but resolute. "She doesn't even know she just became the majority shareholder," Ethan said quietly. "She doesn't care about power," Hannah replied. "She just wanted her babies safe." Ethan nodded, looking out the window at the traffic on Center Street. Still, she earned this, every second of it. Back in the hospital, Lynn dozed off briefly, the painkillers softening the edges of the world. When she woke, Grace Leeton was standing in the doorway. No makeup, no designer dress, just jeans, a hoodie, and eyes swollen from sleepless guilt. Lynn froze. The room went silent except for the soft beeping of the monitors. Grace spoke first. "I shouldn't be here, but I needed to say I'm sorry." Dr. Patel stepped forward instinctively, but Lynn lifted a trembling hand. "It's okay," she said. "Let her speak." Grace moved closer, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know he forged your papers. I thought you were separated. I told myself lies so I wouldn't feel like the other woman." "You were used," Lynn said softly, "just like me. The only difference is, I learned the hard way what power does to people who don't have a soul." Grace's eyes filled again. "I gave the court everything. The emails, the contract. Can't hurt you anymore." Lynn exhaled shakily. "You didn't do it for me." Grace hesitated. "No, I did it for myself. And for them," she said, glancing at the 3 incubators. "They deserve a world without men like him." The nurse re-entered quietly. "Mrs. Park, the baby's vitals are steady. Would you like to touch them?" Lynn nodded. Maya helped her slip on sterile gloves. One by one, she laid her hand gently on each incubator. Tiny fingers twitched under her touch, and for a moment the room felt sacred. "They're so small," she whispered. Maya smiled. "Small things grow strongest, Lynn. You'll see." In the corner, Grace stepped back toward the door. "Goodbye," she murmured. Lynn didn't answer. She didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't spoken, it was chosen. Outside, the sky cleared completely for the first time in days. The city's skyline glowed with light. At that same moment, in a penthouse office on Park Avenue, Adrian Park stood alone as federal agents sealed boxes of documents. The reflection of the sun in the glass cut across his face, sharp and merciless. The empire he built from deceit had finally collapsed, and the woman he tried to erase had just rebuilt her world from truth. Back at the hospital, Lynn leaned her head back against the pillow, whispering a promise to her babies. No more pain, no more fear, just us. And as the smallest baby opened his eyes for the first time, the city outside seemed to breathe with them. Proof that even the weakest heartbeat can outlive the loudest lie. Morning painted Manhattan in soft gold, but the light felt different, cleansing, almost merciful. The storm that had haunted the city was finally gone, leaving the streets gleaming like they'd been scrubbed clean of lies. Inside Mount Sinai, the smell of coffee and sanitizer mixed in the air. Nurses changed shifts, machines beeped softly, and the world outside Lin Nguyen's hospital window kept moving as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Lin, everything had changed. She sat propped up against a pillow, still pale but awake, wrapped in a thin hospital blanket. On her bedside tray sat a paper cup of Starbucks coffee, lukewarm but comforting, and a folded newspaper. The headlines stretched across the front page in bold. CEO's empire falls amid fraud scandal. Wife survives emergency triplet delivery. Her name was everywhere now, but the story didn't belong to them. Dr. Maya Patel walked in with her tablet. "Vitals are holding," she said softly. "Your body's healing. You'll need weeks before you can walk steadily again." Lynn smiled faintly. "Weeks? I didn't think I'd get." Maya sat beside her. "You fought harder than anyone I've ever seen." Lynn's eyes drifted toward the incubators. 3 tiny miracles, each with their own rhythm of survival. Hope's hand was twitching. Faith's breathing had stabilized. Noah's eyes blinked open and shut as if he was already curious about the world he'd entered. A soft knock interrupted them. Hannah Tran stepped in, her hair pulled back, circles under her eyes from too many nights without rest. "Morning, Lynn," she said, holding a manila folder. "You ready for some good news?" Lynn nodded weakly. "I could use a reason to breathe deeper." Hannah placed the folder on the tray. "Judge Bennett finalized the injunction. You retain ownership of 51% of Park Technologies. The remaining assets are frozen under federal supervision pending investigation. You're safe, and so are the babies." Lynn blinked. "It's over?" "Legally, yes," Hannah said. "But emotionally, it's just beginning." Maya chuckled softly. "Lawyers and doctors, we both deal in recovery, just different kinds." Across town, Adrian Park sat in a conference room under harsh fluorescent lights. The once impenetrable CEO now looked small against the backdrop of gray walls and evidence boxes. His lawyer whispered furiously beside him as federal agents cataloged documents. Every signature, every forged line, every misused dollar was now itemized and labeled. When one agent sealed the last box, he muttered, "Funny how empires fall faster than they rise." Adrian didn't reply. His Rolex had been confiscated. His phone lay on the table like a dead limb. He glanced at a newspaper someone had left behind. Lynn's face stared back at him, holding her newborns, fragile but unbroken. Something inside him twisted, not remorse but recognition. She had survived him. Back at the hospital, Ethan Cho arrived quietly, still wearing his Park Technologies ID badge. He stopped at the doorway, unsure if he should enter. Lynn noticed him and smiled faintly. "You came." He stepped closer. "I wanted to see that you're really okay. The board's transferring control to a temporary executive committee. They're naming me interim CEO." Lynn tilted her head. "You always had integrity. Don't lose it." Ethan nodded. "I won't. I promise the company will become what it was meant to be, the one you dreamed of when you and Adrian first started." Her eyes softened. "That dream's yours now. Just remember why it began. To heal, not to profit." Outside the window, the sun climbed higher, painting the skyline in shades of promise. Hannah packed up her files. "There's talk of a documentary, Lynn. People want your story." Lynn shook her head gently. "Let them talk. I'm done performing pain for the world. My story isn't headlines anymore. It's lullabies and baby breaths." Maya adjusted the IV. "You've earned peace. Let it stay." Down the hall, a nurse laughed softly as one of the babies sneezed. The sound was so small, yet it filled the entire room with light. Lynn closed her eyes, whispering, "This is what survival sounds like." And outside, as the city hummed awake, the woman once written off as a casualty of power quietly became its most powerful truth. The courthouse on Center Street pulsed with noise and tension as the clock struck 9 a.m. Monday. Outside, reporters crowded behind metal barricades, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons of truth. The air was cold, sharp, and electric, the kind of morning New York reserved for the downfall of powerful men. Inside, the marble corridors echoed with hurried footsteps. The double doors of courtroom 4B opened, and people filed in, lawyers, journalists, executives, and silent spectators drawn by scandal. The sign on the door read State of New York versus Adrian Park. At the front, Judge Claire Bennett adjusted her robe and glasses, her calm presence commanding the room. Beside her sat the clerk, organizing a mountain of files marked fraud, coercion, medical exploitation. Adrian entered, flanked by 2 attorneys. The confident CEO, who once commanded stages and spotlights, now looked hollowed out, his tailored suit hanging looser on his frame. He didn't look up at the reporters whispering or the former colleagues glaring from the benches. He only looked at the empty front row, where Lynn should have been. Across town, Lynn sat in her wheelchair by the NICU window, wrapped in a soft gray blanket. Her babies were sleeping side by side, their tiny chests rising and falling beneath the warm glow of incubator lights. Hannah knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to go today," she said. "Your statement's already filed. The world doesn't need to see you hurt again." Lynn nodded, eyes never leaving her children. "Then let them see the truth instead." Back in the courtroom, Claire began. "Mr. Park, you are charged with fraud, coercion, and falsification of medical consent. Do you understand these charges?" "Yes, Your Honor," Adrian said, voice barely audible. "Do you plead guilty or not guilty?" His lawyer rose. "Not guilty, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Claire lifted her gavel. Silence. Hannah entered quietly from the back carrying a sealed envelope, Lynn's handwritten testimony. She approached the clerk's desk and handed it over. "From Mrs. Lynn Nguyen Park," she said. Claire broke the seal and began to read aloud. Her voice echoed across the room, steady and unflinching. "To the court and to the man I once trusted. I don't seek revenge. I seek accountability. While I lay unconscious bringing your children into the world, you tried to erase me from it. But I survived, not because I was strong, but because people stood up when you tried to make me invisible. If power means hurting others, I want no part of it. If love means ownership, I release you from it. All I want now is peace for my children, truth for my name, and justice for every woman who's ever been silenced." The courtroom was silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Adrian stared at the floor, jaw tight, eyes glassy. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't respond. Claire set the letter down gently. "Mrs. Park's words will be entered into the record. Now, Mr. Park, do you still maintain your plea?" Adrian's voice cracked. I didn't mean for her to." "She almost died," Claire interrupted. "You signed her life away for stock options." "I was trying to save my company," he muttered. Claire's tone hardened. "You destroyed your humanity instead." Across the room, Ethan sat silently, watching. He'd come not as an executive, but as someone who still believed decency could exist in business. When Adrian finally turned his head, their eyes met. There was no victory there, only pity. Claire banged her gavel. "This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed to a full criminal trial. The defendant will remain under federal custody pending further investigation. Bail is denied." The room erupted. Reporters scribbling, cameras flashing, lawyers whispering. Adrian slumped back into his chair, the sound of metal cuffs echoing louder than any verdict. Outside, the city roared with headlines. At Mount Sinai, Lynn's nurse whispered, "It's over, Mrs. Park. He's not walking free." Lynn looked down at her babies, smiling faintly. "Good, because now we can finally begin." She leaned closer to the incubators and whispered softly, "You're the only legacy that matters." And as the gavel's echo faded across Manhattan, one man's empire ended where a mother's quiet truth began, in the heartbeat of her children. The glass tower on Park Avenue stood silent against the New York skyline, its polished facade reflecting the morning sun like nothing inside could ever go wrong. But behind those pristine windows, chaos simmered. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and Ethan Cho stepped out, clutching a folder labeled Emergency Board Session. His reflection in the glass showed a man who hadn't slept in 2 days, but carried the weight of someone who'd decided to do the right thing, no matter the cost. Inside the boardroom, the tension was almost visible. Men in tailored suits whispered over espresso shots, women in pencil skirts scrolled through stock reports, and the company's logo, Park Technologies, glowed coldly on a massive digital screen. The headline scrolling across the ticker outside read, "CEO Adrian Park faces federal charges, company under investigation." Ethan placed the folder on the conference table. "We need to start," he said firmly. "There's no reason to delay this." Beverly Kaplan, the company's largest investor, leaned back in her chair. Her diamond brooch glittered under the fluorescent lights. "Mr. Cho," she said, voice sharp as glass, "do you understand the magnitude of what you're doing? You're asking us to remove the founder from his own company." Ethan met her gaze. "I'm not asking. I'm protecting the company from collapsing under the weight of his crimes." The younger board member, Daniel Ross, frowned. "What about the shares? Half of them belong to his wife now." "Exactly," Ethan replied. "Mrs. Park is the legal majority shareholder, and she's recovering in the hospital. But before you all assume this is a hostile takeover, let me read her message." He opened a folded letter, Lynn's handwriting, uneven but graceful. To the Board of Park Technologies, this company was born from an idea: to make healthcare accessible, not profitable. If it can survive without greed, then let it live. If not, let it die with honesty. I have no intention of leading, only ensuring that truth stays in the foundation. Do not serve me. Serve what we promised the world. The room fell silent. Even the steady hum of the city seemed to pause outside the glass. Beverly Kaplan cleared her throat softly. She sounds reasonable. Ethan nodded. Reasonable saved this company's soul. She deserves your respect. Another executive spoke up. And Adrian? Ethan looked at the empty leather chair at the head of the table, the one Adrian had ruled from for nearly a decade. Adrian Park no longer represents us. His name will be removed from all corporate documentation, effective immediately. The words hung heavy, like a gavel strike without a courtroom. Across town, in the federal holding cell, Adrian sat at a metal table, staring at the wall. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall before a guard stopped by his cell. "You've got visitors," the guard said. He looked up to see two men in suits, SEC investigators. One dropped a stack of files on the table. "Mr. Park, we've traced the accounts. Offshore, Cayman Islands, Singapore, all tied to your authorization." Adrian leaned back slowly, eyes hollow. "You'll never find everything," the agent smirked. "Maybe not, but your wife already did." Meanwhile, back on Park Avenue, the board voted. The decision was unanimous. Adrian Park, founder, CEO, visionary, was officially removed. Ethan signed the final document, his pen shaking slightly. "We rebuild from here," he said quietly. Beverly nodded. "Then let's rebuild with transparency." As the meeting adjourned, Ethan walked to the window. Below, Park Avenue buzzed with taxis and life. For the first time, he didn't see a corporation. He saw people, patients, doctors, mothers, children, the ones this company was supposed to serve. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to Lynn. "It's done. He's out. The company's yours, in name and in truth." Back in the hospital, Lynn read the message as the sun filtered through her window. She smiled faintly, her babies sleeping beside her in their bassinets. "Not mine," she whispered, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. "Theirs." Outside, the skyline glittered. Park Avenue alive with new purpose. Manhattan reborn in morning light. And for the first time in years, power didn't belong to a man who took, it belonged to a woman who survived. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the hospital windows, painting the white walls in a warm, deceptive glow. Lynn sat upright in bed, a soft blanket draped over her lap. Her babies slept quietly in the NICU beside her room, each connected to a rhythm of beeps and tiny breaths that had become her new lullaby. The nurses moved gently around her, their whispers careful, their smiles real. For the first time in months, Lynn felt something close to peace. Then came the sound of cameras. Down the hallway, a familiar voice cut through the sterile calm. Smooth, rehearsed, and wrong. "Just a few photos, please. This is a private visit." Lynn's spine stiffened. She didn't need to look to know. "Adrian?" The door opened, and there he was, dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to look casual, holding a bouquet of white lilies. Behind him, two photographers and a hospital publicist trailed, pretending they belonged there. Dr. Maya Patel stepped in immediately, blocking the doorway. "This floor is restricted, Mr. Park." Adrian smiled, all charm. "Doctor, please? I just want to apologize to my wife and see my children. No cameras inside, I promise." "Your apology can wait for the courtroom," Maya said coldly. He lowered his voice. "Off the record, doctor. The press is outside. If they see me leaving without a picture, it'll look bad for her. We both know perception matters." Lynn's voice came from behind her. "Doctor." "Let him in." Maya turned. "Are you sure?" Lynn nodded, eyes steady. "Yes, I want to hear it." Adrian walked in slowly, the lilies trembling slightly in his hand. "You look stronger," he said softly, as if that erased the past. "I brought these for you." "I'm allergic," Lynn said simply. He froze, then set them awkwardly on the table. "Right, I forgot." Silence filled the room, broken only by the faint hum of medical machines. He looked at her. At the woman who'd once followed him through every storm, who'd built his empire quietly behind the scenes. Now she looked untouchable, wrapped in calm that came from surviving something worse than betrayal. "Lynn," he began, "I know you hate me, but I need you to understand. I was desperate. The company was falling apart. I thought if I controlled the narrative, I could save it for both of us. For both of us." Lynn echoed softly. You mean for you and her? Adrian winced. Grace is gone. She turned everything over to the court. You were right about her. About everything. Lynn's expression didn't change. This isn't about her. This is about you signing my name while I was unconscious. About you turning our marriage into a transaction. About you choosing headlines over humanity. He took a step closer. I'm sorry. Lynn met his gaze. Calm, sharp, merciless. No, Adrian, you're sorry you lost. He blinked. That's not true. It is, she said quietly. If the judge hadn't stopped you, you'd still be smiling on that stage, calling her your new beginning. You're not here because you care. You're here because the cameras are outside. His jaw tightened, his charm cracking. You think I came here for PR? I know you, Lynn said. Every move you make has an audience. But this, she gestured to the small room, to the sound of her baby's breathing. This is mine now. You don't get to perform here. He stood there, speechless, realizing there were no angles left, no script that could fix him. Dr. Patel stepped back in. Time's up. Adrian hesitated, then looked toward the NICU window. Can I at least see them? Lynn shook her head. Not today. Not until they can understand who you are and who you chose to be. He swallowed hard, the weight of her words finally sinking in. Lynn, please, I just want a chance to. But she turned away. Your chance ended when you kissed her. He stood there another moment, then set the lilies on the bedside table and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Dr. Patel walked over, her hand resting on Lynn's shoulder. You okay? Lynn exhaled. For the first time, yes. She looked at the lilies, too white, too artificial, and pressed the call button. When the nurse came in, she pointed at them. Please take those out. I'd rather have light than flowers. And as the door closed again, the sun caught on the hospital window, reflecting a woman who had lost everything except her dignity, and somehow that had made her unstoppable. The morning after Adrian's failed apology, Manhattan woke to headlines that tore through the internet like wildfire. Fallen CEO denied access to wife and newborns. Triplet mother rejects public apology at hospital. For once, the sympathy belonged entirely to Lynn. She hadn't spoken to the press, hadn't posted a word, and somehow that silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. Meanwhile, in a quiet cafe across from the courthouse, Grace Layton sat alone at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee she hadn't touched. Her phone vibrated non-stop with notifications, interview requests, hate comments, messages from reporters offering money for her side of the story. She ignored them all. For the first time in years, Grace wasn't thinking about fame or image. She was thinking about consequence. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Tired eyes, makeup smudged, designer coat draped over guilt. She whispered to herself, you can't fix what you helped break. The bell above the cafe door rang. A man stepped in, Ethan Cho. He spotted her immediately and walked over, cautious but direct. Grace. She stiffened. If you're here to lecture me, save your breath. Ethan sat down across from her. I'm not. I'm here because the board needs your testimony finalized. The SEC wants everything you've got. Every file, every message. She nodded slowly. I already sent them everything. I want this to be over. He studied her face. You could have run. You didn't. Grace let out a bitter laugh. Run where? My name's everywhere. I'm the villain in every headline. Maybe I deserve it. Ethan leaned forward. Maybe. But doing the right thing now still matters. Grace's voice cracked. You know what hurts most? I thought he loved me. He told me Lynn was cold, detached, said she cared more about data than about him. I believed him. I believed every word because it was convenient. Ethan's expression softened. He lies like he breathes. That's how he survives. She looked out the window, eyes glistening. Not anymore. Across the city in her hospital room, Lynn sat watching her babies through the NICU window. Their tiny fists waved aimlessly, unaware of the wars fought for their survival. The nurse adjusted the oxygen tubes and smiled. They're getting stronger every day. Lynn smiled faintly. They're not the only ones. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Hannah lit the screen. Grace turned everything in. SEC confirmed. It's over. Lynn stared at the words for a long time. Then she typed back. No, it's beginning. At Park Technologies headquarters, Ethan stood before a small crowd of employees. The company's logo glowed faintly behind him, but something about the room felt lighter. Less corporate, more human. I know this week's been chaos, he began. But we're still here because of one person, Lin Win Park. Her vision built this company. Her courage saved it. Applause broke out. Some employees wiped away tears. She's not coming back, Ethan continued. But her principles will guide everything we do from now on. Transparency, care, and integrity. From this day forward, Park Technologies becomes Nguyen Health Systems. The room erupted again. That same afternoon, Grace walked into the federal building, folder in hand, and signed her final deposition. When she turned to leave, she ran into Hannah in the lobby. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Finally, Grace said softly, "Tell Lynn, I'm sorry." Hannah looked at her carefully. "She doesn't need your apology." Grace frowned. "Then what does she need?" "Peace," Hannah said. "And she's getting there." As Grace stepped outside, a gust of cold wind hit her face. The city around her felt different, louder, but also freer. She pulled her coat tighter and walked away without looking back. At Mount Sinai, Lynn held Noah in her arms for the first time without tubes or monitors. His eyes opened briefly, catching the afternoon light. She smiled through tears. "You did it, little one." The door opened, and Ethan entered quietly. "He's beautiful," he said. Lynn looked up. "So's the truth. It took everything, but we finally got there." Ethan nodded. Grace testified. "Adrian's assets are frozen. It's all done." Lynn traced Noah's cheek with one finger. "No, it's healed." She leaned down, kissed her baby's forehead, and whispered, "You'll never know the world your father tried to build. You'll know something better." And for the first time in years, truth wasn't whispered in courtrooms. It was cradled in a mother's arms, alive, breathing, and untouchable. The day of the final ruling came with a chill in the Manhattan air. The kind that made the city look sharper, clearer, like truth had cut through the fog. Outside the Supreme Court building, reporters lined the steps, their breath turning to mist in the morning cold. The headlines had already decided the outcome before the gavel even fell. The CEO who lost his empire to the woman he tried to erase. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low murmurs. Adrian Park sat at the defense table, hands cuffed loosely in front of him, suit wrinkled, eyes hollow. His lawyer leaned close, whispering strategy that no longer mattered. Across the aisle sat Hannah Tran, representing Lynn, her briefcase resting neatly on her lap. Beside her was Ethan, silent witness and moral anchor. Judge Claire Bennett entered, her black robe flowing like a shadow of justice. She took her seat, gavel in hand. Court is now in session. Adrian's gaze flickered briefly to the spectators' bench. He half expected Lynn to be there, to see him fall. But she wasn't. He didn't know that she was miles away at Mount Sinai, cradling 3 newborns who were breathing on their own for the first time. "Mr. Park," Claire began, "you stand accused of financial fraud, falsification of medical consent, and coercion under state and federal law. Do you wish to make a statement before sentencing?" Adrian hesitated. His throat tightened. The room waited. Then he spoke, voice low, frayed. "I thought I was saving what I built. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." Claire's expression didn't change. "You forged your wife's name while she was sedated in a hospital. You used her vulnerability as a business strategy. That's not saving, Mr. Park. That's destroying." Adrian looked down. "I've already lost everything that mattered." The judge leaned forward. "You haven't lost enough yet." The courtroom gasped softly. Claire turned to her clerk. "Read the sentence." The clerk rose, paper trembling slightly in his hand. "On counts of fraud and coercion, Adrian Park is sentenced to 8 years in federal custody, with eligibility for parole after 5. All personal and corporate assets obtained through falsified authorization are to be transferred to Mrs. Lin Win Park and the Charitable Medical Foundation under her name." The sound that followed wasn't cheers or applause, just silence. A silence so deep it felt like the city itself was listening. Adrian's lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's done," he whispered. But Adrian wasn't listening. His mind flickered through memories, the champagne-lit ballroom, the confetti, the kiss that never meant love. And then Lynn's voice, the last thing she'd said to him in that hospital room, "You're sorry you lost, not sorry you lied." When the guards led him away, he didn't resist. For the first time, he understood the difference between power and peace. Outside, the crowd surged with cameras flashing. Hannah stepped into the cold air, pulling her coat tight. Reporters shouted questions. "Where is Mrs. Park? Will she take over the company? How does she feel about the verdict?" Hannah stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. "She feels free," she said simply. Then she walked away. At Mount Sinai, the news played on the small TV in Lynn's room, muted. She didn't need the words. She could read everything in the images. The courthouse steps, the flashing lights, the headline ribbons scrolling across the screen. Dr. Patel entered quietly, holding a chart. "The babies are ready for discharge in a week," she said. "They're healthy, Lynn. You did it." Lynn smiled faintly. "No," she said softly. "We did it." Hannah arrived a few minutes later, breathless from the courthouse. "It's over," she said. "He's going away. The judge transferred everything. The company's yours, and your foundation's already trending online. People are donating from everywhere." Lynn looked at her children, their tiny faces glowing under the soft hospital light. "Good," she whispered. "Then let's build something that heals instead of hurts." She turned to the window, the Manhattan skyline rising beyond it, proud, bruised, but unbroken. Adrian's name would fade, buried in scandal, but hers, quiet, steady, and true, would live on in every clinic, every child, every second chance her foundation created. And when the gavel fell for the last time, the real verdict wasn't 8 years in prison. It was the silence that followed, the kind that only comes when justice finally breathes. 1 week later, the sky over Manhattan was the color of promise, pale blue streaked with light gold, the kind of morning that seemed to start everything over. The city that had devoured dreams and reputations for breakfast was now whispering a new name: Linwin Park. The doors of Mount Sinai opened to a small cluster of nurses, journalists, and staff gathered quietly outside. Lynn sat in a wheelchair, her babies swaddled in soft blankets, one pink, one blue, one yellow, cradled carefully in her arms. She looked smaller than the city had imagined, gentler than the headlines described. But there was something unshakable about her now, something that no storm could touch. Dr. Maya Patel walked beside her, proud smile hidden behind her mask. "Are you ready for the world again?" she asked. Lynn laughed softly. "No one's ever ready for the world, but I'm ready for them." She looked down at her babies. "That's enough." The hospital doors slid open. Flashes went off, reporters whispering questions they weren't brave enough to shout. "How does it feel to be free? What will you do next? Are you taking over Park Technologies?" Lynn didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her answer was in the way she looked forward, steady, sure, like a woman who had walked through fire and come out carrying light. A sleek black SUV waited at the curb. Ethan stood by the door, dressed in a charcoal suit, his tie slightly loosened. He looked less like an executive and more like a guardian. "The board's ready for you," he said quietly, "if you still want to see the office." Lynn nodded. Just for a moment. The drive to Park Avenue was quiet. The city blurred by, Central Park's green fading into glass towers, the rhythm of horns and wind filling the space between them. Lynn rested her hand on one of the bassinets beside her. Her babies slept peacefully, unaware that their mother was about to walk back into the building where she had once been erased. When the SUV stopped, Ethan helped her out. Park Technologies, now Nguyen Health Systems, glimmered above them in fresh silver letters, newly installed that morning. The crowd of employees waiting in the lobby burst into applause when they saw her. No speeches, no microphones, just gratitude. "Welcome home, Mrs. Park," Beverly Kaplan said, stepping forward. The investor who had once doubted her now looked humbled. "The company's officially yours." Lynn smiled softly. "It's ours," she corrected. "And it's not just a company anymore. It's a promise." She walked slowly through the glass atrium, the light catching the polished marble floors. The conference table where Adrian once ruled had been replaced by an open layout filled with sunlight, plants, and laughter. Screens showed the company's new slogan, "Healing is the future." Ethan handed her a silver pen, Mont Blanc, polished but simple. "The paperwork's ceremonial," he said, "but it's tradition for the new chairwoman to sign the first initiative." Lynn signed the document without hesitation, the Lin Nguyen Foundation for Maternal Health. The moment she finished, applause filled the room. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the pen, thinking of how Adrian once used one just like it to take everything away, and how she had used the same act to rebuild. Afterward, she stepped out onto the rooftop terrace. From there, Manhattan stretched endlessly, glass and steel glinting under the sun. Ethan joined her, carrying a small blanket-wrapped bundle. "Noah, Your empire looks better in daylight, he said with a grin. Lynn laughed softly. It's not an empire. It's a beginning. She took Noah into her arms and held him up toward the skyline. This is where we start, she whispered. Not from power, from purpose. Down below, traffic roared, horns blared, and the world went on as always. But in that rooftop moment, it was quiet. Just a mother, her child, and a city learning to believe in her again. Ethan stood beside her. You know, he said, Adrian used to say Park Avenue was built on ambition. Maybe now it's built on redemption. Lynn turned to him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. No, she said, it's built on survival and love that didn't quit. And as the morning breeze swept across the skyline, the woman once betrayed stood taller than the towers around her. Proof that rebirth isn't rising from ashes, it's deciding the fire was never the end. 1 year later, Manhattan glittered under a velvet sky. The chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel blazed like stars, and soft jazz spilled from the grand ballroom. Tonight wasn't a corporate event or a wedding. It was the first annual Ling Wen Foundation Gala. A night celebrating the rebirth of a dream that began in pain and ended in purpose. Outside the hotel, luxury cars lined the red carpet. Photographers called out names, flashes popping like fireworks. Inside, the city's elite, CEOs, doctors, artists, and philanthropists filled the golden room. The centerpiece read, Healing has a name. At the center of it all stood Lynn, wearing a soft white gown that shimmered under the lights, her hair swept into a graceful bun. No diamonds, no excess, just quiet strength. A delicate silver necklace with 3 small pendants rested above her heart, engraved with the names Hope, Faith, Noah. Dr. Maya Patel approached her, glass of champagne in hand. You look like the calm after the storm, she said. Lynn smiled. Maybe because the storm taught me how to dance in the rain. They both laughed softly. Across the room, Ethan Cho stood near the stage, talking with donors. He wore a simple tuxedo, his tie slightly loose, that familiar calm confidence surrounding him. When his eyes met Lynn's across the room, he smiled. Not the smile of a man in love, but one who respected the journey. Mrs. Park, came a familiar voice from behind. It was Hannah, now General Counsel of Nwine Health Systems. She handed Lynn a small velvet box. Before you go on stage, something came in the mail this morning. Lynn opened it. Inside was a folded note and a plain gold ring. The handwriting was unmistakable. For what it's worth, I finally understand what you built. I hope someday our children forgive me, eh? Lynn stared at it for a moment, then closed the box gently. Prison must be teaching him reflection, she said quietly. Do you want me to dispose of it? Hannah asked. Lynn shook her head. No, keep it in the Foundation's archive. It's part of the story. Every scar is. The orchestra softened. The host, standing at the podium, spoke into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman whose courage rebuilt not just a company, but a movement, Mrs. Lin Wen Park. Applause filled the ballroom as Lynn walked onto the stage. She paused, taking in the sight. Hundreds of people, some who once doubted her, now standing to honor her. But she didn't feel victorious. She felt peaceful. Good evening, she began. A year ago tonight, I was in a hospital bed fighting for my life and the lives of my children. The world outside was cruel, and the silence inside that room was louder than any applause. I thought everything was over, but I was wrong. The crowd leaned in. What I learned, Lynn continued, is that survival isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding. It's about turning pain into purpose. I didn't create this foundation to erase my past. I built it so no woman has to face what I faced alone. A ripple of emotion moved through the audience. Even the cameras, usually ruthless, seemed softer tonight. She smiled faintly. They said I was broken. They were right. But sometimes broken things shine brighter because of where the light gets in. Applause swelled. Maya wiped a tear from her eye. Ethan clapped slowly, pride glinting in his expression. Lynn's voice grew gentler. To every woman who's been silenced, speak. To every man who's lost his way, change. To every child born into chaos, you are proof that love still wins. As the orchestra rose behind her, Lynn glanced toward the back of the ballroom, where a screen projected images of her triplets at home, smiling in matching pajamas, their laughter frozen in perfect innocence. She closed with a whisper that carried farther than the microphone. This isn't my comeback. This is our beginning. The audience stood, clapping, some crying. Flashbulbs went off, but Lynn didn't flinch this time. She stood tall, unafraid of the light. Outside the plaza, the city shimmered, alive with stories of resilience. Somewhere in a quiet cell, Adrian watched the broadcast from a small TV, silent and hollow, and for the first time, he didn't feel anger, only awe. And as the final note of music faded, the woman once betrayed by power became the symbol of what power could never buy: grace, forgiveness, and a legacy that would outlive them all. So that's how the story ends. Not with revenge, but with healing. And if you're still here right now, my friend, maybe something in Lynn's journey touched your heart too. Maybe it reminded you that life will break us sometimes, but we always get to choose what happens next. As Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Lynn didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she chose peace when anger would have been easier. She turned her pain into purpose, her silence into strength. And that's something we can all carry into our own lives. No matter what's been taken from us, we can always rebuild with truth, dignity, and love. If this story made you feel something, even for a second, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with us. Because here, we tell stories that heal. Stories that remind us that the human heart, no matter how shattered, always finds its way back to the light. You survived your hardest days. Now, let's grow through them together.